So back to the situation here. Okay, hopefully there's a lot of concepts to juggle here at once. I mean, we started talking about groups, but we got off on talking about the root user and how groups relate to the root user. So Debian, out of the box on Debian, the groups does not matter for who is allowed to run privileged system commands, administrator level commands, or the root user level commands. Your regular user, you just have to know the root password in order to do stuff. You log in as the regular user, and then you can use su, and you type in the root password, and you do stuff. Now, you may remember from the passwords file that Wendell was specified twice. So if we look at password again, and we look, more toward the end of the file, and we look for my user account, okay, there it is. So we've got 1000 colon 1000. What is this colon 1000 here? We know this is a comment field, but what is this other 1000? Well, that's the group ID. That's the primary group of the user. And so we can see that, 42, 42 for GDM, and if we less group, and we look for 42, see GDM is group number 42, and we can also see that Wendell is group 1000. And of course, Wendell is a member of group Wendell, although maybe that's not always necessarily the case. I mean, it's not, like I say, it's not necessarily a requirement that a user on a system have their own group. That's a relatively recent convention in terms of Unix conventions anyway. So just something to keep in mind. Now, how would we add groups? Well, if you guessed add group, you'd be wrong. It's group add. Because remember, everything is sort of an interface. Add user was a friendlier script that does all of this stuff. Man, group add. And this is one way that you can kind of remember, which one is which. User add, user mod, group add, So group add, well, create a new group. Group add creates a new group account, blah, blah, blah. We're using man. Get used to using man and not Google, at least for your first line of defense. Sometimes the man pages are a little dense. You can use the TLDR pages that I mentioned before. But we can add a group. So yeah, look at that. Non-unique -p for password. The encrypted password as returned. Note, this option is not recommended because the password will be visible by users listening to the... You should make sure the password respects the system's password policy. Passwords for a group? What? Don't need to worry about that. Alright, group add. Let's call it devs. Okay, now there's a group called devs. How do you add users to it? User mod. So if we type user mod, we get some. We can also do man user mod. We ran man because we're the man user mod. Then we want to append the user to an existing set of groups. So we'll do devs. -gdevs-a. There you go. Notice that it is really particular about the order that you run stuff in. Now, it's very subtle, and it's not super well explained here in the parameters. So, user mod -G, alright, -G, dash groups. New list of supplementary groups. So this is changing the groups on a user. But, I don't care what groups the current user belongs to. If you're not paying attention, and let's say that you had a user that was kind of complicated and belonged to several groups, if you just do G and only specify devs, the new group that we just added, it's going to take them out of the other groups that they're in. That's probably bad. But -A will append the user to the supplemental groups mentioned by the G option without removing him or her from other groups. So if you're thinking I will do -G, -A, devs, that will not work. It will not. It does not treat that as an option because group -A does not exist. It's -G groups and then -A to append them. And so if we less group and we look at it, we see that I'm still a member of Wheel, and there's a devs group now that has 1002, and we see that I still belong to the other one. Let's pretend that we got that wrong. What happens when we get that wrong? Oh, look at that. This is actually accidentally a really extra terrible situation. See, I'm not a member of the wheel group anymore, which means that if I exit this shell that I'm in, if I do who am I, I'm root right now. If I didn't specify the -A, I just changed my supplemental groups of Wendell, intending to add myself to the devs group, and I did add myself to the devs group, but now I've taken myself out of all of the other groups. Whoops. And so now, because I'm not a member of the wheel group anymore, if I exit this shell where I'm root, I'm not going to be able to get back in. That's bad. Of course, I can specify other groups. See, what was it? Devs, wheel, Wendell? Is that right? Maybe that needs to be quoted. Maybe comma separated? Comma separated it is. Woo! So I'm still a member of Wheel. That's good, at least. Still a member of my own group. And now I'm also in Dev. And that's how we roll. That's why you got to be really careful with a lot of this stuff. You could have accidentally just now put yourself in an impossible situation where if you were the only user on the system, we would have to do something Herculean, like boot in the single user and restore it, or do something really crazy like that. And this type of thing is pretty much universal. User mod and user add and user del. User del is a command for deleting users, so we could delete the Bob user, for example, if we want to, and be able to deal with that later. In terms of like system cleanup and removing their files and their home directory and any sort of a mess that they've made, and any special considerations to the system as far as like the security context goes. So user add, user mod, user del, group add, you got group del as well. These are user management commands. We've also got add user, which is a little bit of a helper script, a little bit more friendly, but this is why you got to be careful. All this stuff is why you got to be careful when you're messing with users on the system. You could accidentally open yourself wide up and not even realize it, especially with remote access, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in just a minute. But we need to talk about SSH next, and that's really exciting because SSH, secure shell, that's how you can get a remote login prompt. So, pretty fun.